Hello everyone, the Nerdy Steve here with special guest Luigi, and today we will be featuring a mono blue Tempo Explorer deck. The list is in the description below. I will talk about the basic gameplay, some of the specific card choices, and a little bit about the sideboard, and then we'll play a couple of matches. So, let's go! You can ask 100 different Magic players what tempo means to them, and you will get 1,000 different answers. So, excuse me as I try to incorrectly and wrongly explain what tempo is. I also think tempo is a little deck dependent, but that's, neither here nor there. Luigi does not like tempo talk, by the way. So, we're going to talk about Spell Pierce real quick, because I think it kind of exemplifies what tempo means. In that we are spending 1 mana to interact with any non-creature spell our opponent can cast. And that goes from them spending 1 mana on Fatal Push versus 5 mana on a Teferi Hero of Dominaria. And Spell Pierce can counter both of them. Now, other decks, our deck has like a mana value no greater than 2 for the most part, right? So, other decks, when they have to cast a 3 mana spell, and we counter it for 1 mana, that is setting them back a lot of time while we are still able to forward our game plan. And that is kind of how this deck functions and how it wins, is we really want to use our very, very cheap spells as efficiently and as effectively as possible in order to kind of outmaneuver and outpace our opponent's spells, right? So that's kind of where the tempo is. There's a time element to this. Like, as the game goes longer, your opponent is now able to... They're not going to be as tightly restricted on mana and choices as you are, because your game plan really, really can function on a couple mana while other people can't. So the early game, you want to set a really, really big advantage with a couple of creatures and use then all your open mana to then counter your opponent's spells before it gets to the late game. If that kind of makes sense, I may have misstepped here or there, but that's the basic idea. And so I want to talk about first all of our interaction. So we have Spell Pierce, we can counter target non-creature spell unless they pay 2. Lofty Denial is any spell unless they pay 1, but if you control a flying creature, which is the majority of the creatures in our deck, they have to pay 4. And then we also have Geistlight Snare, which is one of our more expensive spells in the deck, but it can very easily cost 1 or 2 mana, and it counters any spell unless an opponent plays 3. And again, I just want to make the point is these are spells that are very, very cheap, but they can interact with anything our opponent does. And that's kind of where the frustration and the hate towards this type of deck is you're playing against a mono blue deck, and you finally draw your 5th or 6th land to cast your really, really big spell, and then your opponent, with 1 or 2 mana up, counters it, right? And then you're like crying, and then they untap and you're in the same situation again, hoping that they do not have a counter spell. So a lot of this deck is also, playing this deck is, a mental victory against your opponents as well. But in addition to those counter magic, I want to talk about Slip Out the Back as well. It's kind of in a very, very similar vein as the other spells, right? You can slip out the back your own creature in response to a removal spell or a mass removal spell in order to save it, and now your creature comes back stronger. And if your opponent spent more than 1 mana on it, and you only spend 1 mana to counter it, that's going to be a really, really good deal for you. And so then we have our creatures. We have all of your creatures theoretically can be cast at instant speed. Rattlechains is a 2/1 spirit with flash, and it allows all your other spirits to be cast as though they had flash. And that works with your Supreme Phantom, Shacklegeist, and your Ascendant Spirit. But these 3 cards can normally only be cast at sorcerer speed, and that's fine because they're very, very cheap. But there's potential for this entire deck to be cast during your opponent's turn. And that can be really, really frustrating. That's where a lot of this power comes from. Because if you don't have to tap your mana during your turn, you can really learn to respond to what your opponent is doing and making everything they want to do go terribly for them. But with that being said, we do have Ascendant Spirit, which is a 1 mana 1/1. So it's on turn 1, you can very easily cast this and then leave up your mana for the rest of the game to see what you want to do. But it's a 1 mana 1/1 that you can put your mana in to make it bigger and bigger and eventually become a lethal threat. And this card can end games on its own, and your opponent is going to have a really, really difficult time killing it because it can't even be blocked very easily because if your opponent blocks with a 2/2 on turn 2, you can then make it a big creature, right? So it's going to get in a lot of damage early on, and then whenever you aren't countering a spell or you don't need to use your mana for anything else, you can pump it up. We also have Spectral Sailor, which, again, like Ascendant Spirit, only costs 1 mana, and it has a way for you to use your mana when you're not countering other things. And what's really, really powerful about Spectral Sailor is drawing a card, I don't know if you know this, is one of the best things you can do in a game of Magic the Gathering. And so you have this 1 mana card that your opponent's not going to really want to Fatal Push or kill, but they're going to have to because if they don't, you're going to start gaining card advantage and drawing cards that are going to then be able to interact with your opponent's stuff in a much less favorable way for them, right? And then we have Rattlechains, which seems very, very, very innocuous, right? It's just a 2/1 with flash. However, this goes into kind of the counter spell and tempo theme of this deck. If you have a Spectral Sailor and your opponent tries to kill it, instead of doing Lofty Denial to counter it, if you Rattlechains, not only do you give your Spectral Sailor hexproof in response, but now you add another threat to the board, right? And that's part of, again, this deck's design and where a lot of the power comes from. Because now not only are you using mana, very, very low mana cost cards to counter your opponent's spells, but if they spend 2 mana to kill your creature, and not only do you spend 2 mana to add a creature to the board, but then to counter their removal spell, you're just so far ahead in the game. And that's where Rattlechains' power comes from. And then we have Shacklegeist, which is a 2 mana 2/2. And Shacklegeist can be used to, along with another spirit, and all the creatures in your deck besides Brazen Borrower are spirits, to tap down big creatures that maybe you weren't able to counter. And then you can then attack for a really large amount on the attack back, right? And then we have Supreme Phantom, which goes with the spirit theme, and it makes all your other spirits get +1/+1. And this is a part of the deck where it's not necessarily tempo oriented, but it's very the aggro part of the deck, the aggro oriented, where sometimes you get a hand with that very little counter magic, but you have a turn 1, maybe a Spectral Sailor, followed by a turn 2 Supreme Phantom, and a turn 3 Supreme Phantom, and now you have these really, really large evasive flyers that your opponent might not have the interaction or removal with to destroy, and you can kill your opponent very, very quickly. And if they do end up having something, you can then counter it maybe with one of your other spells. And that's kind of the basic idea of the deck and how it's going to turn out. You're going to want to cast maybe Ascendant Spirit or Spectral Sailor on turn 1, and then you're going to mostly want to wait and respond to see what your opponent is doing and force them to make the first step of action. Then you can respond accordingly by either countering it or letting it resolve and going, oh, you know what? I can deal with that Llanowar Elves, or I could deal with that wolf, right? And there's another card that's very, very important to this strategy, and this is Curious Obsession, which I haven't talked about yet. And this is something that is a very, very, very powerful card in the deck, but it's also, for me, a really, really difficult card to use very effectively, and every time I cast it, I feel like I'm using it wrong. And by that I mean, Curious Obsession is very, very powerful. You want to put it on a creature, hopefully an evasive threat like Spectral Sailor or, Shacklegeist or really anything. And if you get one attack in, you draw a card. So Curious Obsession replaces itself, and then if the creature dies, you are not down a card, right? And that's really, really good in this deck. But the really, really powerful part comes in when you start drawing multiple cards with Curious Obsession. So now you're drawing a lot of cards, and you can protect the creature that the Curious Obsession is on, and then you can just draw more and more cards with it. So you protect the Curious Obsession a creature. If your opponent's spending a card to kill the creature that you're protecting, and you keep on drawing more, you're just gaining so many more resources than your opponent is able to spend, right? And they just fall behind, and you win that way. But I said that Curious Obsession has been really, really hard for me to use, and sometimes I find that I'm not using it as aggressively as I should, or um using it way too aggressively. And there are times where maybe it's not right to Curious Obsession a creature, and you can hold up the counter magic to interact with your opponent's removal spell. Or maybe you should do it sooner rather than later to get those cards flowing and not worry about your opponent's interaction. And it's little changes like that make this deck really, really hard to navigate. This is a deck that requires the player to know what is potentially going to come from the opponent's deck and what you have to play around, and really learn to prioritize. Okay, if my opponent plays this card, which they likely have or not likely have, how badly do I need to counter or interact with it? What do I need to play around? And then you can really prioritize how you navigate the game. And so that's something to really, really think about, is that this deck kind of requires you to know the meta game and know what's going on in order to really, really get the most out of all the interactions that you have. And that's what this deck, you're interacting with your opponent literally at every turn. It is not a solitaire deck. You have to really think about your game plan based on the first land that they play and go, okay, I think they're an aggressive deck. I think they're a control deck. And that's something that why this deck is really, really powerful is that in people who know what's going on, you can really take advantage of that and leverage your cards in a way that other maybe decks can't. And then we have our sideboard. We have Cerulean Drake, the mono red matchup. You know how I said this is a tempo deck? The mono red matchup functions very, very cheaply, and your deck against other decks with very low mana value loses a lot of its power. So you need cards that can really, really stem the bleeding and help you win those games, and that's why we have 4 Cerulean Drakes. We also have Aether Gust, because mono green is also very good against you, because their creatures are really cheap and really big, and you need ways to interact with those. We also have Mystical Dispute for the mono blue matchup. And as you can see, we have cards for mono red, mono green, mono blue. And what this is doing is, because we're a tempo deck and we need to really attack the deck we're fighting against, and a lot of our main deck cards are kind of good against a lot of different strategies, but if you can get something that's a little more efficient and a little more effective in mana value or how well it interacts with your opponent's stuff, you're going to want to do that because that's what your game plan is. And then we also have Brazen Borrower for more interaction to, if your opponent's casting cards that cost 4 mana and you can petty theft it and remove it from the board, that's wonderful for you. Because you've only spent 2 and you still have a card, and now your opponent's also down their entire play. And then we have Unlicensed Hearse, just as a, way to interact with the different graveyard strategies that, Cat Oven is something that the pieces only cost 1 mana each, and even if you counter the cat, it can still come back from the graveyard. So that's a strategy that can beat this deck because, again, very low mana value, and so you need to find a way to disrupt that. And that's what this is for. And with that, I hope that was kind of a decent explanation. So let's go play some games. This is a weird hand. We don't have any counter magic, really, like no interaction, but and that's not great for us. Woe Strider. The sacrifice deck doesn't seem like that great of a matchup. Mayhem Devil's really, really good against us. And they are very low to the ground with their mana and everything. So it's going to be really, really hard. The Supreme Phantom and the Curious Obsession hopefully will be enough. They have a block with a Goose here, but I think we counter that. And then we'll see what they do here. They might just block here to stop us from drawing, but if they don't, that's good. They're not sacrificing a Goose to draw. I'm not gonna do anything. Let's play another Phantom. So I like this right now because we have 2 types of counter magic up. We're gonna snare that. Again, we do not want a Mayhem Devil to resolve. That would be absolutely abominable. Okay. I think in response here, we will return the Woe Strider to hand. Right now, they will not have anything to sacrifice and cannot deal any singular damage. They could have a Fatal Push. Or a Trail. Or they're gonna make a food here. Okay. This is a lot of triggers. Oh, that was silly. We probably could have just went for lethal there, everyone. I was trying to be too cute. Because I'm worried about Rattlechains, I think. Giving something hexproof. Okay. Yeah, this can be very, very bad, because we can just lose on the spot. Innkeeper? Okay. One, two, three. That's 6. That's a lot of damage our opponent can deal. They can just cast a Woe Strider from the graveyard and probably win. Okay. Mm, please don't punish me for playing terribly. Please. Hmm. Another Deadly Dispute. Can they deal 4 to that? They can, but then they would have to sack that. Oh, thank God, everyone. Ugh. That was scary. That was very scary. So now we have to figure out how we win this matchup. And honestly, I do not know. I don't even know if Curious Obsession is good here. Hmm. I don't know. I don't know. Let me know what you would do. Hmm. Well, here goes another Curious Obsession one. 2. Innkeeper. Got it. Alright. Mayhem Devil, and then I cry. Oh, alright. Fatal Push and I cry. We go to 3. Or we take 3, we go to 17. And now, what am I thinking? Not a lot. I'm very scared. I'm assuming they have a collected company here. What's interesting here is if we go for Rattlechains, we do not have... Yeah. Like, we don't have a 2-mana spell that could... If Rattlechains resolved, we could Geistlight Snare, but our opponent did it in between, like, that really, really good moment. So, good on them. And now we're just gonna Curious Obsession, and our opponent's gonna have to block with the Goose from now on. And a problem here, because we waited so long to actually do stuff and get action, right? Our snares are much less effective. Much less. Because they have so much mana. So it is something to be aware of. And maybe we should have tried to act a little sooner. I think we need to try and counter this, even though they... can bring it back eventually. Take action. Can they... Damn. That's not good. I think we want to try and slip out the back now. The Mayhem Devil. Okay. I don't know what we can possibly draw here, but... That's not good. Nope. So I'm gonna slip out the back the Devil again. And see what our opponent does. Oh, I didn't even block? Oh, I'm sorry. I mentally knew what I wanted to do. What a shame. Well, double Mayhem Devil's gonna win it for them regardless, so... That was unfortunate, but we're fine. And that's okay. We all make mistakes sometimes, right? And sometimes you just forget to frickin' block. Ugh. We'll keep here and hope we draw another land would be amazing, right? Because if we can Spectral Sailor here, alright. And now if we draw an island, we get to Geistlight Snare. And this is one of our best openings. We didn't get it. So now our opponent knows this is a free Fatal Push target as well. Okay. But now we're in a really, really theoretically a good spot, right? Because we can start doing that. Yeah, we can snare it. We can counter our opponent's next couple of plays, and they are under pressure. And maybe I'm supposed to Supreme Phantom there. Depending on what our opponent does, will... The Goose... is fine. Mayhem Devil is not. Alright. We're doing this. So now we can, if they cast a Mayhem Devil, we can slip out the back the Priest of the Forgotten Gods. And I think that's what they were hoping to do. To wipe our board. Oh, they're gonna Goose again? Okay. We can slip out the back this. And see what our opponent does here. So they still have Coco mana? I think I messed up. I should have tapped the Goose first, maybe? Let's hope that their Coco's very, very bad here. Oh, Deadly Dispute? Okay. Alright. Our opponent is at 1. That means they cannot have a shock land, which, you know, might help. A Mayhem Devil would be terrible still. Of course. As one does. If they have another creature that they can then use Priest with, yeah. This is gonna just wipe our entire board. Basically. Oh, we can do that. So, we win! Good job. Oh god, I was gonna cry if I was gonna lose that one. And nobody would want to see that, right? Alright, Trios. This isn't a great hand. If our opponent mulligans, that means we can keep, right? Alright, I think this is probably much better against Yorion. Love another blue, but... Fabled Passage tells me they're probably elementals. Oh, are they Sultai, Yorion? Omen, I think, is fine. Our objective here, I think, is to really only counter the really, really big spells our opponent has. Like Emergent Ultimatum. And next turn, we're going to have a really, really hard choice if we want to cast the Supreme Phantom or not. And it seems like a little innocuous thing, right? But I want to be able, if I cast Supreme Phantom, then I can't double Spell Pierce, and I want to be able to maybe Spell Pierce what they have here. And again, Spell Piercing that isn't the worst, but I don't want them to maybe get anything from their sideboard. That just seems bad for us. And I don't want a 2-for-1 if we can stop it. I cast the Spirit there because I had stuff up. And now I'm gonna Spell Pierce the Languish, because that allows me to activate this. And now I have the Snare up. I think I want to do this instead of Supreme Phantom, but I'm not sure. No, I think I like this more. Oh, good job. Whew. Alright, that worked out very, very well. I think we want Mystical Dispute. I don't know if I love Brazen Borrower here. Probably Aether Gust. They definitely have green spells, right? Even though we didn't see any. They are an Emergent Ultimatum deck. So I would have to assume. Right? But maybe not. Maybe not. And Slip Out the Back is only going to really be used defensively. Ooh, maybe we don't want Shacklegeist. They probably have the Elder Gargaroth or whatever it's called, and we're probably going to want to tap that down, so... But we'll see how it goes. We have to mulligan. If we can get our Curious Obsession going, that would be amazing. I highly doubt we will. But we have a couple of turns. And we can protect it. Thoughtseize? No. We'll counter it. Giving them less information is probably for the best. Oh, a divide by 0? Okay. Are they gonna get environmental? Yeah, that's what I figured. Maybe they'll go and try and kill it. And then we can flash in our Sailor and everything will be fine. Please do not counter it or anything. No, if you have a blue counter spell, that's fine. Don't remove it. Eliminate. I think we have to do that. They probably have a board wipe, but at least we'll draw a card. A little disappointing. But... Binding? Okay. We're just going all in. And maybe we shouldn't have done the Ascendant Spirit. I thought the Ascendant Spirit would be a little more of an aggressive play. However, now if we draw a land, we're going to play, and our opponent knows we only have a Spectral Sailor in hand, so we can't even bluff a counterspell. Which isn't necessarily the most relevant thing, but it is relevant. Maybe our opponent just didn't draw an ultimatum, though. Shadow's Verdict? Okay. Binding? Okay. Opponent gets to Yori on the Binding, which is so problematic for us. It's very not good, everyone. And they also have so much mana that none of this is good. You could attack opponent. We're doing the Curious Obsession here first. So now this Gaslight Snare costs 1 mana, which might be relevant. And GG. That was good. Thank you for watching me play some Mono Blue Tempo in Explorer. Two things. First, I accidentally recorded an entire match muted, and one of the really good games in it is posted after the credits, so you can totally watch that if you want. It's a really, really good game, not telling if I won or lost, but it is completely muted. So, who knows? But other than that, this deck, as I said, it is very, very, very hard to play. You have to mulligan for the right cards. You have to really have a good game plan of knowing when to counter something, what to counter, when to, hold on to your Rattlechains. I feel like I've lost several games because I wanted to get the hexproof value from the Rattlechains instead of making a 2/1 creature. And that's often a really, really vital turning point in some games. If you want to start being aggressive early, you probably should. And my instinct is to get as much value as out of my cards as I possibly can. But sometimes the most value in a card is killing your opponent, right? But this deck is really, really great. I think there's a lot of options, specifically in the sideboard, to really, really help in certain matchups. And I think if you know what to expect in the metagame, that's going to help you a lot. It does, I think, suffer a little bit against more aggressive strategies and matchups. And again, the sideboard can probably account for that. But I think in a more control metagame, this deck can really, really shine. Or even in a combo metagame, you can probably just navigate games very, very easily and use your card advantage and counter magic to just put people really, really, really far behind where they can't ever catch up. And with that being said, if you haven't already, you should totally subscribe, like, or comment on this video. You can watch me stream live at twitch.tv/thenerdysteve. And I hope you at least learned something from this video. I know I did. And I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening wherever you are. Thanks for watching. Bye. Okay, I don't necessarily love this hand because, again, we don't have any real interaction and no one drop. But maybe this is an aggressive hand where we can just attack our opponent and kill them with a lot of flyers very, very quickly. Alright, opponent... Oh, and look what we drew. Our opponent seems to be on a Coco Angels. deck. So we're gonna do this, then we'll attack. If they block, we can make ours a 2/3. They oops, probably didn't see that, but that's like part of like the tempo of this deck. We can do everything at instant speed, and it's gonna require our opponent to interact, right? And so I'm doing this now, and this might be wrong, but because we don't have any counter magic, I'm not gonna even bluff anything. And hopefully they don't have a land and they can't Coco. Like, this is actually really good for us. Alright. I would have loved to drawn, I don't know, anything really. Bishop? Okay. Our opponent's gonna gain a lot of life here, but I think that's fine. Maybe we can bait them into attacking. Yeah, so we get to give this hexproof, and then we can Supreme Phantom. This can block that. We go to 8. And they'll probably block that.